So in this tutorial, we're going to talk a little bit about cell shading and inking, and some inking technique. And so in this one, as you guys can see, and it's from kind of a holdover of our tutorial on cell shading in general on the form. As I've said before with cell shading, it just kind of helps you map out and gives your forms some dimension so they don't look like flat kind of coloring books. And if you shade it in, it's kind of also a map for you to be able to start filling in your inks. So I might start with a key line around things, and I tend to use a brush pen, the Kuretake brush pen, because it gives me a nice thick to thin sort of shape. So I'm going to pretend that my light source is, of course, coming from above. So it's going to be a little bit of a lighter sort of touch up here at the top. And a little bit bolder line here at the bottom. So there's my key line. And then I might fill in some of the shadows. A bit of a heavier brush or a thicker brush or a watercolor brush. I'm just kind of filling in the shadows, and I'm going to come back later and add a little dimension to them with a brush pen by adding some feathering to it. Like so. Sometimes this is referred to as spotting the blacks. It's again where you're just kind of filling everything in with your heavy shadows first, and then you can come back over, maybe add a little texture to it. So with feathering, feathering is literally, it's thick to thin strokes. The thick part of the stroke starts in the shadow, and the thin stroke comes out, and the closer you are to the, or rather the farther away you are from the light, the thinner or less line you get. So for example, I press heavy and then there's a thick to thin shadow, and I just kind of flick my wrist. And then as they get closer to the shadows, there are bigger lines, and as they get farther away from closer to the light, they get smaller. So in case point, if my light's going over here, then my it's going to get thinner and then thicker as it gets closer to the shadow. So thinner lines and thicker as it gets farther away from the light. So they look kind of like little triangles. And you want to do these with a brush so that you can get the thick and thin line, because if you do it with your technical pen or something like that, you're going to get a little disappointed, because then it's not going to look quite so much like a feathered line as much as it's going to look kind of like a, I don't know, caterpillar or something like that, centipede or something. It's just not going to be thick and thin line. It's going to be just this kind of even weighted line, and you don't want it to look like that. You want it to be nice, thick and thin, and you kind of also want to kind of wrap them to where, you know, bend them a little bit so that it looks like that they're taking on that kind of roundness of the form. That can help you define muscles and, you know, whatever it is that you're drawing, so that it helps kind of give it some form and some depth to it. But you can also go over with feathering marks to create some depth and some texture, almost like a hatching. You know, the trick is that you want it to really kind of complement the form that you're trying to shape. So it should always be like wrapping, thinking of it in terms of you're wrapping these lines around the forms. But that's basic inking of the form, and it's all laid out in your pencils beforehand, so it sort of acts as like a map for you. But that's basic inking and feathering techniques when you're drawing.